Well, good morning, everyone. Good to see you, especially the people from St. Francis in Bakersfield. We are on the Gospel of St. Mark, and we're on the Passion narratives. Jesus is now dragged into the Sanhedrin circle to answer questions about theology and his teaching, and the issue of, well, Jesus of Nazareth, you came into Jerusalem recently acting as if you were the long-awaited Messiah. Messiah means one who's been anointed king of Israel. Well, Herod's already here. Herod is king of Israel, not you. Are you one of these messianic usurpers? And what will Rome think about we having this difficulty, having a double king, one that is legitimately recognized by the Roman Imperium, and the other is a Galilean itinerant usurper. So Jesus is now dragged before the Sanhedrin, and he's asked questions. As I said in earlier broadcasts, they start to ask the questions and trying to find charges against Jesus. So we read this in Mark chapter 14, and this will be Mark chapter 14, verses 53 to 72. We're now on verse 55. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus and to put him to death, but they had found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony, in fact, did not agree. Well, if you're going to try Jesus for heresy or for some social, political, or even issue of Torah, then should you not have your ducks in a row? Should you not have things ordered to the point that if you're going to drag someone to some jurisdictional trial, you better have legitimate concerns? Well, they don't. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, we heard him say, I will destroy the temple made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another made without hands. But even on this point, their testimony did not agree. Again, Jesus does, in fact, as I said in earlier broadcasts, he and his apostles and disciples take over the temple. Now, in John's gospel, the cleansing of the temple is at the beginning of his messianic ministry, but in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which is the synoptic tradition, is at the very end. And as I said before, this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. He, on his own authority, goes into the temple and casts out the money changers and those who were selling items to be offered up in Holocaust. Now, technically speaking, the money changers had to be there, which had to exchange Gentile coinage, which had the image of the emperor, which is seen as a god. Well, that couldn't be allowed in the temple precincts. It's idolatrous. Therefore, they had to exchange money. So the money changers had to be there. The people that sold the item to offer up for sacrifice, cereal offerings, lambs, goats, sheep, cattle, whatever, for Holocaust had to be there also to offer up sacrifice. So those things that Jesus was casting out, these items, these people had to be there. Okay, so the question now is, well, why did he do that? Well, again, you have made my Father's house a den of thieves, namely, that which was to be offered up in sacrifice had to be without any defection. It had to be absolutely pristine. And of course, if you're going to have items offered up in a certain way that had to be of a precise kosher condition, then the pricing would have been rather exorbitant. And many scholars believe this is the issue, that some say that Jesus is upset with his followers with the fact that they were offering to the Father, again, the God that lives in the temple, damaged goods that were not fit to be offered up. And the people that were selling them at an exorbitant price. So extortion. So you cheat God and you cheat people. So the virtue of justice, giving that which is due to someone, is in fact being violated. That's why he takes over the temple. And as I said before in earlier broadcasts, this could not have been done by himself. Okay? You must understand that. This is an armed takeover. And it's not a matter of Jesus, as in some Jesus movies, overthrowing this or that table filled with coins and etc. No, the temple treasury was a whole protocol of stalls and shops. It isn't small. If you've ever been to the temple or the remnants of the temple, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He could not have taken over the temple by himself. So him and his disciples, apostles, and others that sided with Jesus against the Sadducean way of offering sacrifice. The Sadducees were priests and Levites, members of the Jewish aristocracy that ran the temple concession. Okay, so he overtakes the temple. He prohibits people from buying and selling, therefore shutting down the sacrificial activity of Israel. You shut down the temple. You don't offer sacrifice. What are you talking about? This is an armed takeover. And it's only in the afternoon that Jesus allows people to go back to the temple, and then he retires to the Kidron Valley. Grave problems here. So this was it. In the Jewish mind, and the high priest, the Jewish authorities, the Torah teachers, the scribes, the Levites, the high priest, enough was enough. And so at this particular juncture, he's dragged, he is arrested at Gethsemane after the Last Supper, and he's dragged now to the Sanhedrin, and he's now examined by the high priest. This Sanhedrin examination is only found in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's not found in John. John has an interrogation by Annas, the former high priest and father-in-law of Caiaphas, the present high priest. In John's gospel, Annas simply interrogates Jesus and asks him two questions. What is your teaching and who are your disciples? We know exactly what we want to do with you, but we have to follow the Torah. We have to follow the law precisely. There's got to be an examination to find out whether or not you have committed blasphemy. Okay. And so we want to know what you've been teaching and who are your disciples. Not that we have you, we want the rest. Okay. Now that's only in John. Now in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which is the synoptic tradition, we have the following in Mark. But even at this point, their testimony did not agree dealing with the nature of temple sacrifice. Then the high priest stood up before them all and asked Jesus, have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you? But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus says, I am. Now, this is a very important issue. The term Messiah or Messiah has multiple definitional structures. It's not univocal. There's not just one definition. So the term Messiah in its original form means one who's been anointed. And later in the historical theological development of Israel, it's one who's been anointed King of Israel. So there's the attachment, the monarchical attachment. And so at this juncture, the expectation is that when the Messiah comes, he will be the Goel, the vindicator, God's advocate, the viceroy coming from God to rule Israel in a real authentic way. And that he would have a certain legitimacy given to him by the Father, by God himself, and that hopefully he would rout out the Roman Imperium, and that Israel would be a nation among many nations. It would be an enlightened nation because of Torah. Nations would come to Israel, not only because of its political acumen, but rather the fact that it's filled with understanding and wisdom given by God through the Torah. They would seek the wisdom of God coming through Israel. Israel would be a mediational reality to all the world. And the value, the hope, the faith of Israel, the truth about God, the truth about human existence would be validated and mediated through the theocracy and therefore the theology and the revelatory disclosure of God to Israel historically. So Israel would be the point of mediation for all nations, okay? Because it has the Torah, okay? So when the high priest asked Jesus, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One, or the Son of God? The Son of God has multiple meanings. Son of God in Matthew, Mark, and Luke refers to a moral union with God, a moral union. You see God as an absolute good. God is merciful and just. He's asked you to be merciful and just. And so with the election of your freedom, you are merciful and just. Therefore, you have a moral union with God. Okay? Any Jew that was Torah observant was a son of God. The king of Israel, when he ran the theocracy of Israel according to Torah precept, was a son of God, again, by moral union. Prophets were sons of God insofar as they announced faithfully God's word. Angels were sons of God insofar as they were the mediate expression of God's will. The high priest, when he offered sacrifice, according to Levitical law, was a son of God. The Messiah was to be a son of God. Again, all by moral union. That's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. However, and this is where we get into some major distinctions, in John's gospel, whenever you have the Son of God, it only refers to the Logos, to the will, the law, the mind, and the soul of God, resting in the bosom of the Father, the heart of the Father, the bosom of the Father. That's where the Son of God lived. That's where the Logos or the Word of God lives. And the Messiah or the Son of God was of divine origin, divine union, divine nature, not just a moral union. So the term Son of God in John's gospel means divine nature, not just moral union, divine nature. And therefore only Jesus as the Logos, as the will, the mind, the law of God resting, coming from the bosom of the Father, he alone is the Son of God. So the term is not univocal. There's multiple definitional structures here. However, again, another major distinction. In the Synoptic Gospels, in this particular context, when Jesus stands before the high priest in Mark's Gospel, he's asking Jesus, are you of divine nature? So this is the exception. Normally, the Son of God in the Synoptic tradition refers to a moral union. But the way the question is being answered or asked and answered by Jesus in Mark's Gospel, he's asking, are you of divine nature? And how does Jesus respond? He says the following, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. The ego of me, the I am of God. Exodus chapter 3, when Moses asked God, what is your name? So that when I go back to the Israelites now in Egypt, they will know that you sent me. So what is your name? I am who I am. Or in the Hebrew, Hayeh Esher, Hayeh, or Yahweh. I am. It means self-existence. I am who present to you, or I will be for you whatever tomorrow demands. These are transliterations of the ego of me, the I am in Greek. That is the name of God. I am who I am. And that is the identification, the self-identification of Jesus when asked by the high priest, are you the Son of the Blessed One? Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? And Jesus says, ego a me, the name that God spoke to Moses as a point of self-identification. Jesus now identifies with the deity that speaks to Moses from the burning bush. They are one and the same. This is blasphemy. And not only that, he will say, and you'll see the Son of Man, this is Daniel 7:14. The Son of Man is a human divine figure that goes before the Ancient of Days, Yahweh, God, in the chariot throne room of God in heaven, surrounded by myriads of angels, and the ancient ones, the Ancient of Days, Yahweh, the I am, gives this individual, the Son of Man, complete authority over every language, nation, and people. And he will allow him to create his own kingdom, which will be perpetual. That is the Son of Man. So when the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? Jesus uses the divine name as seen in Exodus chapter 3, and then identifies with the God who spoke to Moses as person to person, and says, I'm coming back as the Son of Man. I will come back on the clouds of heaven, and I will be judging you. This obviously enrages the high priest. He tears his garments as a sign of contempt, ritualistic contempt. And he says the following, then the high priest tore his clothes and said, why do we still need any witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What is your decision? All of them condemned him as deserving of death. So some began to spit on him and blindfold him and strike him and say, prophesy. The guards also took him over and beat him while Peter, below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. And when he saw Peter warming himself, started to stare at him and said, "You were also with Jesus from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I don't understand what you are talking about." And he went out into the forecourt, and the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him again, said to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But he began to deny it. Then after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them. You are a Galilean." But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." And at that moment, the cock crowed a second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had told him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. Okay, that's the trial. It's very clear that they had to have evidence. Now, the problem is going to be, as I said in earlier broadcasts, some governors of Israel, which is now a vassal state of the Roman Imperium, gave a blanket permission to exercise capital punishment. In this particular case, this is not the situation. They need permission by Pilate. Now, again, Pilate is concerned about one thing. Is this Galilean rabbi, this rabble-rouser, trying to usurp Herod's power? Is he performing acts of treason? Do the Jews have enough evidence to have him destroyed? Now, the Sanhedrin could care less about Roman law. The only thing they're caring about, he has transgressed the Torah. There are so many charges against Jesus, and they are conflictual. Issues of the temple, issues of Sabbath and Sabbath healing, issues of kosher, issues of messianic expectation, the role of Torah, the role of prophecy. There's a lot of charges against Jesus and his unique nearness to God. There's all sorts of issues here. So they got to figure out, will this be enough to have us given permission to have him executed? The problem is Pilate. All he cares about is he breaking Roman law. He could care less about Jewish law or some arcane theological issue about the Torah. We're not interested in that. Is he trying to overrule and cast out Herod as legitimate king of Israel? He rode into Jerusalem as this long-awaited messianic figure. Is this an act of treason? Is this a premeditated, deliberate attempt to overthrow the Roman Imperium by usurping the role of Herod? That's the issue, okay? Whether or not he has a certain view about Sabbath law or kosher or the role of the temple or prophecy or some sort of arcane Jewish Toradic principle contained within their law, Pilate could care less. What they want is Roman law, okay? So in Mark chapter 15, verse 1, as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and of the whole council, and they bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Now, to have a full exposition of the role of Pilate in Jesus, you have to go to John's Gospel. Mark has a brief trial before Pilate. It's more like a typical interrogation, and this is the text, Mark chapter 15, verses 2 to 5. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" That's a very important line. Notice he's not asking whether or not he's the Messiah. That's a different thing. He's asking, "Are you the king of the Jews?" That's a political term. Herod's king of the Jews right now, Jesus of Nazareth, not you. So are you king of the Jews? Which is different from asking whether or not he's the long-awaited Messiah. Okay, one is theological, the other is social-political. Are you the king of the Jews? And he answered him, "You say so. The title that you give me is in fact correct." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. You can just wonder what they would have said. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further reply, and so Pilate was amazed. It's very interesting. Jesus, don't you know what's happening here? You can be put to death. If I agree with the Sanhedrin, the elders of Israel, that you are a usurper of King Herod, that is an act of treason. That is an act of insurrection. And I can have you killed. And what do? You are saying nothing to me. Your eldership have given me all sorts of issues here, many issues, many arcane theological issues, something about temple worship, something about the Torah, something about Sabbath laws and healing, something about kosher, and something about some prophetic oracles that are part of your heritage and part of your tradition. I could care less. What I care about is Roman law as it is carried out in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel. That is what I'm worried about. That's what I care about. I'm the governor, and I am supposed to have order. You are an irritant. And by the way, Jesus of Nazareth, crowds, the multitudes are following you. Are you planning an armed insurrection against the Roman Imperium and against my legitimizing authority? I heard about the temple. I heard about you overtaking the temple. Why can't you leave things alone? Who are you? And I might add, what are you? Again, and to get a further understanding, read John's gospel. That's a whole different, that whole dialogue with Pilate and Jesus. When you read John's gospel, Pilate is not in charge. Jesus is in charge. Very interesting. I would urge you to read that. So Jesus goes before Pilate. He also goes before Herod, and this is Luke's gospel. So I'm going to do just a slight divergence and go into Luke's gospel. This is Luke's gospel, chapter 23, verses 6 to 16. When Pilate heard this, that this man was a Galilean, okay, geez. Well, first of all, to finish that, the trial before Pilate, in Luke's gospel, not in Mark. So again, it's a parallel narrative. So you have different perspectives depending on the gospel narrative. In Luke chapter 23, 2-5, then Pilate said to the chief priests and to the crowds, I find no basis for an accusation against this man. But they were insistent and said, he stirs up the people by teaching throughout all of Judea and from Galilee, where he began even to this place. Wait a minute here. Is this man a Galilean? Well, yeah. Well, then he's under Herod's jurisdiction, not mine. Now we go to Luke chapter 23, verses 8 to 16. See, Pilate's ready to release Jesus. There are no social political charges against Jesus. The only charges that could be submitted by the Sanhedrin were theological ones. Pilate doesn't care about that. Is he breaking Roman law? Oh, wait a minute. He's a Galilean? This is not my jurisdiction. He's under Herod's jurisdiction. So when Pilate heard this, he asked whether or not he was a Galilean. And when he learned that he was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him off to Herod. I don't want to deal with this man who was himself in Jerusalem at the time, because this is the time of the Passover, okay? When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had been wanting to see him for a long time, because he heard about him and was hoping to see him perform a sign. He questioned him at some length, but Jesus gave no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. Even Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then he put an elegant robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. I don't want to deal with this Jesus. That same day, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate then called together the chief priest, who was perverting the people, and I have examined him in your presence and have not found this man guilty of any of the charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he's done nothing to deserve death. I will therefore have him flogged, and then I will have him released. Well, this isn't going well for the Sanhedrin. They've lost it. They've lost the battle, both with Pilate and with Herod. So what's the next move? Mark chapter 15, 6 to 15. Now, at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone whom they asked for. Now, a man called Barabbas, Barabbas means son of the father. which is fascinating. Jesus is son of the Father. Now this interesting insurrectionist murderer, Barabbas, son of the Father, who is in prison with rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Now, what is fascinating is that there's no extra canonical or non-biblical sources for this custom. So there's some issues here. So the situation is everything is now on Pilate's shoulders. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to this custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" This Jesus, interesting. Notice not the Messiah, the King of the Jews. It's a political term, not a theological one. For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. And Pilate spoke to them again and said the following, "Then what do you want me to do with this man you call the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked him, "What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them after the flogging of Jesus. And then he handed him over to be crucified. There's all sorts of issues here. What are you going to do? John has a separate understanding of this whole procedure. Before he's handed over for crucifixion, he's mocked by the soldiers. This is Mark chapter 15, 16 to 20. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him and began saluting him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." They struck his head with a reed and spat upon him and knelt down and did him homage. And after mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak, put on his own clothes on him, and led him out for crucifixion. They compelled a Passover, a passerby who was coming from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. And we're going to stop here for the time being and now have our question and answer period. Jay.
Thank you, Father Jude.
Welcome.
All right, so let's move on to the Q&A at this time. If you have a question for Father Jude, please raise your hand. Also, if you want to use the raise hand button, you're more than welcome to use that. Linda. Linda.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. My hand shakes when I go to unmute. When you were talking about when he said, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power. And then you compared it to the line in Daniel 7,
Yes,
where he said, one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven.
that is correct. Okay, let me tell you what that means.
Yes,
Okay,
that's what I want.
so when the high priest asked Jesus, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus answers by self-identifying with the name of God, the name that God gave Moses in Exodus chapter 3, namely, "I am who I am." And then Mark has the addition, not only am the same identity with God, the Ancient of Days, Yahweh, okay, Mark now connects the identification of God with this new personality in Daniel 7:14, the Son of Man. And the Son of Man is a human divine figure
Okay.
that's always rested with Yahweh, or the Ancient of Days, in the chariot throne room of God, surrounded by myriads of angels. And this Ancient of Days bestows upon the Son of Man complete authority for the entire universe, over every land, nation, and people, and that he will create his own kingdom, which will be perpetual. And he tells the high priest, "You might be judging me now. However, there will be a time," this is where we get into Jewish apocalyptic and Jewish eschatology, the activity of God in the future of Israel, and the Jewish apocalyptic, referring to a bizarre cosmological age in a new age to come that's outside of time, where the final revelation of God will take place through the Son of Man. And Jesus is identified as that Son of Man with his own perpetual kingdom, and he's coming back to judge and rule the world. So he tells the high priest, "Not only am I ego me, the I am, the name of God himself, I am that Son of Man in Jewish eschatology, future hope, and Jewish apocalyptic, future revelation, and I am coming back on the clouds of heaven to judge the entire universe. I'm coming back and I will be judging you."
Wow.
This does not go over well, to say the least. So the
Thank
priest
you.
tears his clothing, showing absolute contempt. So Jesus said, "You think you have me now? You have nothing. You don't know what's in store. You have no idea. Because I am the final revelatory self-disclosure of God himself in human form, and I'm going to come back. And when I come back, which is what we call the eschaton or the parousia, I will inaugurate a whole new understanding of the universe outside of time. All will be revealed through me. And the final revelatory perfection of God that should be in the universe will now be in the universe through me. And the world will be recreated. The universe in Jewish apocalyptic theology means a whole new transfiguration of the entire universe, brought about by God's final judgment over creation through the Son of Man, who happens to be the ego me of God, the I am of God, who happens to be the Messiah. So there is an absolute connection between Son of God, Messiah, Son of Man. And in Jesus, all three titles are invested in him. He has complete and utter authority over the creation of the universe. That's a
Thank you for your
very
question,
important
Linda.
statement. Yeah, it's everything. It's everything. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Linda, for your question. It looks like the hand was raised by Mr. Hanson. Go ahead, Mr. Hanson, and then Virginia, you'll be after that.
Good morning. A question first. Any chance that this presentation has been videotaped?
It will be on YouTube once this is over. All of my broadcasts through Zoom, they're all on YouTube. All
Okay.
of them. So,
Okay.
so the stuff that I did this last fall, there were about 50 presentations. The 2 weeks that I'm teaching at St. Francis will be up in Zoom. The week that I'll be teaching at St. Philip's on discipleship will be up in Zoom, up in YouTube. And then I'm teaching the Gospel of Mark to St. Martin de Porres Parish in Sarahita, Arizona. That too, once that is done, that will all be up in YouTube. So yes, it's all there,
Okay.
Harold.
Okay, thank you, Father. I found this morning's presentation to be particularly powerful. I mean, you know, it brought tears to my eyes, and I don't sit in church and have homilies bring tears to my eyes often.
Thank you. Harold, good to see you, buddy. Good to see you.
Okay, one quick question though. And
Yeah.
I'm getting ahead of the game on this one, but when Christ came back from the dead, why wasn't that a sign to the Jewish nation that he was the man? He was Yahweh.
Yeah. I mean, that's the issue. There is a faith dynamic. You can have the empirical evidence. Here he is. He's alive and well. He walked through solid matter. Easter evening, they think they're seeing a ghost. The 12 apostles, no, it's me. The wounds are here, and he's there for 40 days after the resurrection. Again, it deals with the faith. It deals with the faith principle. That's why when Jesus is on the cross and they say him, if you're the Son of God, come down and we will believe you. No, you won't. In fact, I'll do something even better. I will die on the cross. I will be taken down, buried, and 3 days later, I will rise from the dead. And there are people here that will be eyewitnesses to that account, and they still don't believe. So, see, so my question is, what does it take for people to believe? You either accept the faith principle or you do not. You can have all the empirical data lined up. It's all there. And you want to believe it? Well and good. If you do not, so be it. Yeah. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Father.
Most welcome.
Thanks,
Okay.
Harold. And I posted the link there on the chat box. It's www.stdominics.org/father.jude. And then you can find all of the YouTube information on there as well. Virginia, your hand has been raised for a bit, so go ahead and unmute.
Father, when you said that when Jesus comes back, he will create a new earth and a new universe or
Yes,
whatever.
correct. Yes.
Will it be physical or will it be spiritual?
Okay. Whatever is in the mind of God as a final revelatory self-disclosure of who and what he is, since the universe is of matter, and yet human existence and existence per se has a certain spiritual quality to it. whatever it is, both spiritual and corporeal, materiality, whatever God has created and how he has created it through the Logos, the final manifestation and the final completion of what God has always willed will in fact be done. So whatever is will be elevated. Whatever is, whatever exists will be transformed.
Thank you for
Okay.
your question, Virginia.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you.
So at this time, if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand. All right,
Okay.
Father, closing remarks.
Yeah, this evening we'll be getting into the actual crucifixion scene, the death scene, death on the cross, burial today, tomorrow, and we'll end up with the resurrectional narratives. So stay tuned. We'll see you this evening. Thank you for coming.
Thank
Take
you all
care.
for being here this morning. Everyone have a great day. Bye.